right, let's dive into this. AWS S3. When we talk about the cloud, right,
Yeah.
it's kind of easy to just get lost in all this jargon.
Yeah.
But S3 is one of those things where the rubber really meets the road, so to speak.
Absolutely.
It's the foundation of so much what we do online, and you've given us a fantastic collection of sources here.
Yeah, it's quite a bit.
We've got articles, expert guides. There's even a hands-on tutorial in here.
Yeah, we can really dig in.
Yeah, so we're going to uncover not just what S3 is, but also how it's being used in ways that might surprise you.
I think so, yeah.
One article mentioned that Amazon S3 stores over 350 trillion objects.
Yeah, it's a hard number to even fathom. It's just massive.
It really is. That's more than all the stars in the Milky Way galaxy.
It's really kind of mind-blowing when you think about the scale.
It is.
Yeah.
And to help us navigate this vast digital landscape, we have an expert who can explain the why behind the what.
Happy to be here. I think, yeah, it's true. S3 can be kind of this enigmatic thing that people think of as, oh, it's just storage. Right.
But it's so much more than that.
Yeah.
It's a platform that enables all kinds of really exciting things, from making websites load incredibly fast to really driving groundbreaking scientific discoveries.
Okay, so let's start with the basics, right? Like, what exactly is object storage, and why is it different from the way we typically store files on our computers?
Yeah, it's a great question. So with traditional file storage, you have that kind of familiar hierarchy of folders and subfolders.
Right, like on our desktops.
Exactly. And it works well for personal computers, but when you start dealing with truly massive amounts of data, it can become really messy and inefficient.
Okay.
Object storage, on the other hand, it's like having a giant, meticulously organized library.
Hmm.
So instead of folders, you have these containers called buckets, and each piece of data is treated as an independent object with this unique identifier. So it's a much more scalable and flexible approach for handling truly vast quantities of data. Okay, so it's about more than just dumping files into the cloud, right? It's about organizing and tagging them in a way that makes them easy to find and use later on.
Exactly, yeah. And that's where this idea of metadata comes in. So each object in S3, you can attach metadata to it, which is essentially like a digital label.
Uh-huh.
And that provides all sorts of additional information about the object. So imagine if you could search your entire data library, not just by file name, but by date created or file type or even keywords within the content itself.
Oh, wow.
That's the power of metadata in S3.
So you're saying with S3, it's not just about storing more data, it's about being able to actually use that data effectively.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the articles you provided highlighted this really well. It talked about how IMDb, the Internet Movie Database, uses S3 to power that really fast search functionality that they have.
Right.
So they store not just, movie details and things like that, but user reviews, ratings, trivia, all meticulously tagged with metadata. And this allows them to, just like that, surface the most relevant information to users, no matter how complex the search query is.
That's fascinating. I use IMDb all the time, and,
Right.
and I never realized the role S3 played in making it such a valuable resource.
It's a really cool example, yeah.
Yeah, and the sources also mentioned other interesting use cases, like Ancestry.com storing this massive archive of historical images, and the BBC preserving a century's worth of broadcasting history.
And those are some great examples of how S3 is not just about storing vast amounts of data, but also about preserving cultural heritage and making it accessible to everyone.
Right.
It's really cool.
So we've got these trillions of objects stored in these buckets, each with its own unique identifier.
Yeah.
But how does that actually work in practice? Like what are the building blocks of an S3 bucket?
Sure. Think of a bucket like a container.
Okay.
And inside that container, you have objects, which are your actual data files. Each object has a unique key, which you can think of as its address within the bucket. And the bucket itself has a globally unique name. So no two buckets in the entire S3 universe can have the same name.
Okay, so it's starting to sound a bit like a giant digital filing cabinet, but with a lot more flexibility.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. And unlike a physical filing cabinet, S3 is incredibly scalable. So you can have a single bucket with just a handful of objects, or you can have a bucket that holds billions of objects.
Wow.
And S3 automatically manages all of the storage and retrieval of those objects for you. You don't have to worry about the underlying infrastructure at all.
Okay, so we've got these buckets, objects, and keys, but one thing that stood out to me in the sources was the emphasis on S3 not being a traditional file system.
Right.
It's you can't just drag and drop files into folders like you would on your computer.
That's right. So S3 has what's called a flat structure. All of the objects reside at the top level of the bucket. However, you can use prefixes in your object keys to create a sense of hierarchy.
Uh,
So for example, you might have an object key like images 2023 January myphoto.jpg. And this doesn't actually create folders in the traditional sense, but it allows you to group related objects together.
okay, so it's more about using naming conventions to organize your data than relying on a rigid folder hierarchy.
Exactly. And this flat structure is one of the key reasons why S3 is so scalable and performant. It allows Amazon to distribute the data across multiple servers and really optimize storage and retrieval operations.
Okay, so this is already giving me a much clearer picture of how S3 works, and I'm starting to see why it's such a fundamental service in the cloud.
Yeah.
But before we go any further, I kind of want to address the elephant in the room here. Security.
Yeah.
When we're talking about storing sensitive data in the cloud, security has to be a top priority.
You're absolutely right. Security is paramount when it comes to S3, and AWS provides this kind of multi-layered approach to safeguarding your data.
Right.
So by default, all data stored in S3 is encrypted. You can choose from various encryption options depending on your specific security requirements.
Hmm.
And S3 provides very granular access control mechanisms, so you can define precisely who has access to what data.
So it's not just about keeping, the data safe from hackers out there.
Right.
It's also about controlling access within your own organization. Making sure that only the right people can view or modify sensitive information.
Precisely. So you can use things like bucket policies, access control lists, and you can even integrate S3 with AWS Identity and Access Management, or IAM, to manage permissions at a really granular level.
Okay, so this all sounds very robust, but could you give us like a concrete example of how these security features might work in a real-world scenario?
Sure. So let's say you're a healthcare company and you're storing patient records in S3. You would use bucket policies to define who can access the bucket that contains those records.
Okay.
So maybe that's just authorized medical personnel. And then you can use access control lists to further restrict access to individual patient files. So you can make sure that only the assigned doctor or nurse can actually view or modify those specific records.
So it's kind of like having multiple layers of security, from the
Yeah.
building itself down to the individual rooms and filing cabinets.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. And with features like S3 Object Lock, you can actually prevent objects from being deleted or modified for a specified period,
Hmm.
and that ensures data immutability, which is really important for compliance in a lot of industries.
That's essential, especially in industries like healthcare and finance, where data retention and integrity are absolutely paramount.
Exactly, yeah. And with S3's very detailed logging capabilities, you can track every access attempt and data modification. That provides a comprehensive audit trail for security and compliance purposes.
Wow, so this is starting to sound less like a simple storage service
Hmm.
and more like a digital fortress
Mhm.
designed to protect your most valuable assets.
That's a good way to think about it. It's designed to provide the highest levels of security and data protection, so you can have peace of mind knowing your data is safe and only accessible to authorized individuals.
Okay, this has been an incredibly insightful dive into the security aspects of S3. And it's clear that Amazon has taken a really comprehensive approach
Hmm.
to protecting data. But I'm also curious about the other side of the coin here, performance.
Okay.
When we're talking about storing and accessing potentially massive amounts of data, speed and efficiency are just crucial.
You're absolutely right. Performance is key when it comes to S3, and AWS gives you several mechanisms to optimize data transfer and access speeds. One of the sources you shared actually mentioned S3 Transfer Acceleration, which uses Amazon's global content delivery network, CloudFront, to really speed up data transfers, and that's especially helpful for really large files.
Hmm. So if I'm uploading a huge video file to S3 from a location that's far away from the S3 buckets region,
Yeah.
transfer acceleration can make that process much faster.
Exactly. Yeah. So
Yeah.
CloudFront caches your data at these edge locations all around the world so users can access it from the closest possible server. And that reduces latency and really improves download speeds.
It's like having, multiple distribution centers for your data. ensuring that it's always readily available no matter where your users are located.
That's a great analogy, yeah. And then for applications that require even higher performance, there's S3 Express One Zone, which can offer single-digit millisecond latency for data access.
That sounds incredibly fast.
Yeah.
What kind of use cases would really benefit from that level of performance?
Well, think of things that require real-time data processing.
Uh-huh.
So like maybe high-frequency trading where every millisecond really counts. Or maybe you're building a platform that needs to analyze massive data sets in real time to provide instant insights. S3 Express One Zone can really make that possible.
Wow, that's impressive. It seems like S3 is constantly evolving to meet the growing demands of data-intensive applications.
It is. It's a constantly evolving platform. And as we go further into this deep dive, I think you'll see how S3 integrates seamlessly with other AWS services to create really powerful data pipelines and enable a wide range of use cases.
Yeah, I'm eager to learn more about those integrations. But for now, let's take a quick recap. You've given us a solid foundation here on object storage, the structure of S3 buckets, and the robust security measures that are in place.
Right.
What are some of the key takeaways you want our listener to remember from this part of our deep dive?
Okay, so first, I think it's important to remember that S3 is more than just simple storage.
Right.
It's really a scalable, secure, and performant platform that can enable all kinds of applications.
Okay.
Second, understanding the concepts of buckets, objects, and keys is fundamental to using S3 effectively.
All right.
And third, security is really paramount in S3. AWS provides a multi-layered approach to protecting your data from encryption at rest to really granular access controls and detailed logging.
Those are excellent points. Now, before we move on to some of the more advanced features and use cases of S3, I want to pose a question to our listener. What kind of data are you working with? Could S3 be the solution you've been looking for to store, manage, and leverage that data in new and exciting ways? Keep that question in mind as we continue our deep dive into the world of AWS S3.
Yeah. I think that's a great question to think about. You know, what's really fascinating about S3 is how it's become this central hub in the whole data universe. It's not just a place to park your data. It's like a launch pad for doing all sorts of cool stuff.
Yeah, several of the sources mention how S3 integrates with like a whole ecosystem of AWS services.
Yeah.
It's like S3 is the foundation, and you can build all these powerful data-driven applications on top of it.
Right. Exactly. So imagine you have this massive data set sitting in S3, and now you want to analyze that data, gain some insights from it. Instead of having to download, potentially terabytes of data to your own computer, you can use a service like Amazon Athena to query that data directly in S3.
So it's kind of like having this super-powered search engine that can just sift through mountains of data in seconds.
That's a great analogy. And if you need to build a data warehouse, say for business intelligence and reporting, you can use Amazon Redshift. And that can directly access data in S3 as well. So you can perform all these complex analytical queries, generate reports, and you never even have to move the data out of S3.
It sounds incredibly efficient.
Well,
It's like having all your data tools and your data storage in one seamless environment.
Right. And don't forget about AWS Glue. That's a service that helps you kind of prepare and clean your data before you analyze it. So you can use it to automate, data transformation tasks like converting data formats or cleaning up inconsistencies. And guess what? It also integrates directly with S3. So you can create these automated data pipelines that flow directly into your analytical tools.
It's almost like having a team of like data janitors who are just tirelessly cleaning and organizing your data, making sure it's all ready for prime time.
Yeah, that's a fun way to think about it. And here's where it gets really interesting. So S3 has this feature called event notifications.
Okay.
And what that does is it lets you trigger actions in other AWS services based on changes to your data in S3.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Can you give us a concrete example?
Sure. Let's say you have an e-commerce website and you're using S3 to store, all your product images. Every time a new image is uploaded to S3, you can automatically trigger a process that resizes that image, say for different screen sizes, using a service like AWS Lambda.
So instead of having to manually resize every single image, S3 can just automatically kick off that process, saving a ton of time and effort.
Precisely. Or imagine you're a media company and you're storing video files in S3. When a new video is uploaded, you could trigger an automated workflow that transcribes that video using Amazon Transcribe.
Oh, wow.
And that makes it searchable, makes it accessible to a wider audience.
It's amazing how S3 can kind of orchestrate all these actions behind the scenes.
Yeah.
It's like having a personal assistant who just anticipates your needs and takes care of everything.
And that's really just scratching the surface of what's possible with S3 and how it integrates with the broader AWS ecosystem.
Right.
As you explore S3 further, I really encourage you to think about how you can leverage these integrations to streamline your own workflows, automate tasks, and really unlock new insights from your data.
You've painted a really compelling picture of S3's power and versatility here.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, with all these features and integrations, doesn't it get like really complex to manage, especially for someone who's maybe new to AWS?
Yeah, that's a valid concern. It can seem a little daunting at first, but I think AWS has done a great job of providing tools and resources to make it more accessible. So the AWS Management Console offers a really user-friendly interface for managing your S3 buckets and objects. And for folks who prefer a command line interface, there's the very powerful AWS CLI.
Yeah, one of the sources even mentioned a hands-on tutorial that walks you through, the basics of S3 step by step.
Yeah, those are great.
It sounds like a great way to get your hands dirty and just start experimenting.
Absolutely. And don't underestimate the power of the AWS documentation. Right.
Yeah.
It's incredibly comprehensive. It's well written. It provides detailed explanations and examples for every feature and service.
It's like having a digital encyclopedia for all things AWS right there at
Dude,
your
I mean,
fingertips.
exactly. And if you ever get stuck, don't hesitate to reach out to the AWS community. There are tons of forums, blogs, online communities where you can connect with other S3 users, ask questions, and share best practices.
It sounds like you're saying that even though S3 is this powerful and complex platform,
Yeah.
there's a wealth of resources available to help you learn and master it.
Absolutely. Don't let the initial complexity intimidate you. With a little effort and the right resources, anyone can really unlock the power of S3 and use it for their own, data-driven endeavors.
This has been an incredibly insightful exploration of S3's integrations
Yeah.
and this vast ecosystem that surrounds it. It's clear that S3 is more than just a storage service.
Right.
It's a foundational building block for countless data-driven applications in the cloud.
Yeah.
But with great power comes great responsibility, right?
Absolutely.
Security has to be top of mind when we're talking about storing and managing, sensitive data.
Absolutely. We touched on security a bit earlier, but it's worth emphasizing again that AWS provides this multi-layered approach to safeguarding your data in S3. It's not just about setting strong passwords. It's about really understanding the various security features and implementing best practices to protect your data at every level.
So it's not just about building a digital fortress. It's about making sure the guards are vigilant, the walls are strong, and the security systems are all up to date.
That's a great analogy. And one of the key aspects of S3 security is understanding this concept of least privilege.
Mm.
What that means is granting users and applications only the permissions they need to perform their specific tasks and nothing more.
No.
It's like giving, each person in your organization a key that only unlocks the doors they need to access and no others.
It makes sense. The fewer people who have access to sensitive data, the lower the risk of a security breach.
Exactly. And S3 gives you that granular control over access permissions. So you can define who can read, write, or delete objects. You can even restrict access based on IP addresses, time of day, or other criteria.
It's like having a really sophisticated security system that can track every movement in and out of your data center,
Right.
ensuring that only authorized personnel have access to the crown jewels.
That's a good way to put it. And don't forget about encryption. So S3 actually encrypts all data at rest by default, meaning that even if someone were to gain unauthorized access to the physical storage devices, they wouldn't be able to read the data without the encryption keys.
So it's like having, a secret code and only ensuring that your data remains, unintelligible to anyone who doesn't have the key.
Exactly. And speaking of keys, it's crucial to manage your AWS access keys securely.
Right.
These keys are like digital passports that grant access to your AWS resources, including S3. Make sure to rotate your keys regularly, store them securely, and never embed them directly in your code.
It's like changing the locks on your house periodically and
Right.
and making sure you don't, leave your keys lying around where anyone can find them.
Exactly. And finally, don't underestimate the importance of monitoring your S3 activity.
Hmm.
AWS provides these comprehensive logging and monitoring tools that can help you detect suspicious activity, track data access patterns, and identify potential security vulnerabilities. It's like having, security cameras and motion sensors throughout your data center, alerting you to any unusual or unauthorized activity.
Okay, this has been a fantastic deep dive into the security aspects of S3. It's clear that AWS takes security very seriously, providing this robust set of features and best practices to help you protect your valuable data.
Yeah.
But before we move on, I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier: performance. We've talked about speed and efficiency, but what are some practical tips for optimizing S3 performance in real world scenarios?
Sure. I think optimizing S3 performance is all about understanding your access patterns and choosing the right storage class for your data. Remember earlier when we talked about S3 offering these different storage classes,
Right.
like Standard, IA, and Glacier?
Yeah, it was like having different sections in a warehouse
Yeah.
for items that need to be accessed frequently versus those that can kind of be stored, in the back.
Exactly. So if you have data that's accessed very frequently, like website assets or frequently used application files, standard storage is the way to go. But if you have data that's accessed less often, like backups or archives, you can save money by using IA or Glacier.
So it's about choosing the storage tier
Yeah.
that aligns with how often you need to access the data.
Precisely. And here's a pro tip. You can use S3 lifecycle policies to automate the transition of data between storage classes.
Oh, wow.
So, for example, you could set a policy that automatically moves data from standard storage to IA after, say, 30 days of inactivity, and then to Glacier after, 90 days.
So it's like having an automated system in your warehouse that moves boxes to different shelves
Yeah.
based on how often they're needed.
That's a great analogy. And speaking of automation, don't forget about S3 transfer acceleration.
Right.
That can significantly speed up data transfers, especially for large files or for users who are located far away from your S3 buckets region.
Yeah, it's like having a high-speed rail system that transports your data across the globe in a
Yeah,
flash.
and for applications that require extremely low latency, like real-time analytics or high-performance computing, you can use S3 Express One Zone, which, as we talked about before, offers that single-digit millisecond latency for data access.
So it's like having your data stored right
Yeah.
next to your processing power, eliminating any delays or bottlenecks.
Exactly. And here's another performance tip. Consider using S3 Select and S3 Glacier Select. What these features let you do is retrieve only the specific data you need from an object rather than having to download the entire object.
Hmm.
So that can significantly reduce your data transfer costs and improve query performance.
So instead of downloading, a whole book,
Yeah.
you can just download the specific chapter or paragraph that you're interested in.
That's a great way to put it. And finally, don't underestimate the importance of optimizing your data format for S3.
Okay.
So columnar data formats like Parquet and ORC are very efficient for analytical queries because they allow you to just retrieve the columns that you need rather than having to scan the entire row.
So it's not just about where you store your data, it's how you format it to optimize for performance and efficiency.
Absolutely. By following these tips and best practices, you can really ensure that your S3 storage is not only secure, but also performs at its best, enabling you to unleash the full potential of your data.
This has been an incredible deep dive into the world of S3 performance optimization.
Yeah.
It's clear that there are many levers you can pull to really fine-tune your S3 storage
Right.
and ensure that it meets the demands of your specific applications and workload.
And as you continue to explore S3, remember that performance optimization is an ongoing process. It's about constantly evaluating your access patterns, testing different configurations, and refining your strategies to make sure your S3 storage remains efficient and cost-effective.
It's like being a master mechanic, constantly tweaking and tuning the engine of your data infrastructure to achieve peak performance.
That's a great way to put it. And just like A mechanic needs the right tools and diagnostics to optimize an engine.
Right.
You have a wealth of resources available to you to help you monitor and optimize your S3 performance. So AWS provides detailed metrics, dashboards, analytics tools that can give you really deep insights into your S3 usage patterns, and that can help you identify bottlenecks and areas for improvement.
It's like having a high-tech diagnostic system that can pinpoint exactly where your S3 storage is performing well
Yeah.
and where there's, room for improvement.
Exactly. With the right tools and knowledge, you can really transform your S3 storage from just a simple data repository into a high-performance engine that fuels all your data-driven innovations.
Okay, this deep dive has truly opened my eyes to the power and versatility of AWS S3.
Yeah.
We've explored its security features, its integration with other AWS services, and its performance optimization capabilities. It's clear that S3 is more than just a storage service.
Right.
It's a platform that can enable a wide range of data-driven applications and use cases.
And as you continue to explore S3, remember that it's a constantly evolving service with new features and capabilities being added all the time. It's really a fascinating journey of discovery, and I encourage you to kind of embrace the challenge, keep learning, and explore the endless possibilities of S3.
This deep dive has given our listener a solid foundation here to start building upon. But before we wrap up, I want to kind of shift gears a bit and touch on something that emerged from the sources.
Mm-hmm.
The connection between S3 and the world of artificial intelligence,
Hey.
specifically generative AI.
That's a great point. Yeah. S3's massive scalability and its ability to store just vast amounts of data make it an ideal platform for training and deploying these generative AI models that are becoming so popular.
Yeah, one source mentioned a company using S3 to build a data lake specifically for generative AI.
Mm.
They were able to store all their training data in S3 and then use AWS services like Amazon SageMaker to build and train their AI models.
That's a perfect example. And it's not just about storing the training data. S3 can also store the outputs that are generated by these AI models, whether it's images, text, audio, or video.
So it's like having a digital creative studio where AI artists can generate new content and store their masterpieces in S3.
That's a great analogy. And with S3's integration with other AWS services like Amazon Recognition for image and video analysis, Amazon Transcribe for speech to text conversion, Amazon Translate for language translation, you can build these incredibly powerful AI pipelines that leverage, the full capabilities of the AWS ecosystem.
It's amazing how S3 is enabling innovation in such a transformative field like AI.
Yeah.
It's like having a digital canvas where AI can paint its vision of the future.
And as AI continues to evolve, I'm sure we'll see even more innovative use cases emerge that leverage, the power and the scalability of S3.
Right.
It's an exciting time to be working with data, and S3 is really at the forefront of this whole data revolution.
This deep dive has been an incredible journey through the world of AWS S3.
Yeah, it has.
We've covered a lot of ground, but
Yeah.
I'm sure there's still more to explore.
Absolutely. S3 is a vast and constantly evolving service.
Right.
But the insights we've shared today provide a really solid foundation for understanding its power, its flexibility, and its potential to transform the way we work with data.
Before we move on to the final part of our deep dive, I want to leave our listener with a question to ponder. How could you leverage the power of S3 to innovate, create, and unlock new possibilities in your own work or projects? Keep that question in mind as we continue our exploration of AWS S3. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We've really explored the technical intricacies of S3, the security features, how it integrates with other AWS services.
Yeah, it's remarkable how S3 has become this central hub for data in the cloud. It's not just about storage anymore. It's a platform that enables everything from simple website hosting to complex machine learning models.
Yeah. And we've seen how S3 is constantly evolving. It's pushing the boundaries of what's possible with data storage and management.
Absolutely.
But what does all this mean for someone who's not a tech expert, right?
Yeah.
How can they actually take advantage of this technology?
Well, that's the beauty of it. While it's incredibly powerful under the hood, it's also surprisingly accessible, even for non-technical users. think about that hands-on tutorial you included in the sources
Right.
that guides you through the process of creating a bucket, uploading files, even setting up a static website, all in a way that's really easy to understand.
It reminds me of those meal kit services where you get all the ingredients and instructions,
Yeah.
and you can cook a delicious meal, even if you're not a chef,
Exactly. Yeah.
Follow the steps.
Yeah. And the same principle applies to S3. You don't need to be a cloud expert to get started.
Hmm.
You can use the AWS Management Console, which is like a user-friendly dashboard for managing your S3 resources.
Right.
Or you can use the AWS command line interface if you're more comfortable with that kind of hands-on approach, typing in commands.
Yeah. Okay, so whether you prefer a visual interface or a more hands-on approach, there's a way to interact with S3 that kind of fits your style.
Absolutely. And once you start exploring, you'll realize how versatile it is. I mean,
Yeah.
you can use it to back up your personal files, store photos and videos, host a website, or even build a data lake for your business.
It's like having a Swiss Army knife for data.
It really is. Yeah.
You can use it for such a wide range of tasks.
Big or small. And the possibilities are constantly expanding. We talked about earlier how S3 is being used as a platform for generative AI.
Right, right.
So you can store these massive data sets for training AI models and then use those models to create new content, all within the S3 ecosystem.
Yeah, it's like having a digital artist studio in the cloud powered by S3.
Exactly. And as AI becomes more prevalent, we can only expect to see more and more innovative use cases that leverage the power of S3.
Well, this has been an incredibly insightful deep dive into the world of AWS S3.
Yeah.
We've learned about its technical capabilities, its security features, its integration with other AWS services, and its potential to really drive innovation in fields like AI.
Right.
And I hope this deep dive has empowered you, our listener, to see S3 not just as a storage service,
Yeah,
but as a platform that can unlock new possibilities for your data.
absolutely.
Remember that S3 is constantly evolving, so keep exploring, keep learning, and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible with data in the cloud.
And with that, I think we've reached the end of our S3 deep dive. It's been a pleasure exploring this fascinating technology with you.
Likewise. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this journey. We hope you found it informative and insightful.
Until next time.